The flashbacks were touching, but the real highlight was Drew being rolled out like yesterday's trash. General Hospital's tribute to Monica was filled with poignant moments, heartfelt flashbacks, and, thanks to Tracy Quartermain, one scene-stealing act of mercy. Not mercy for Drew Kane, of course, but mercy for the audience, when she rolled him out of the chapel with the brisk efficiency of a woman taking out the trash. It was a masterstroke of timing. Drew, somehow, managed to climb out of his hospital bed, attend the service, and then roll himself back into the ward, as though the whole ordeal were nothing more than a coffee break. His miraculous mobility wasn't even the most absurd part. The real crime was his decision to open his mouth during a service honoring Monica. Cue Tracy, who swooped in, claimed the floor, and reminded everyone that Monica's house will always remain Monica's house. A cutting truth wrapped in respect, unlike Drew's petty grandstanding. Even Jason and Michael, both poised to intervene, wisely stepped aside when Tracy advanced. They knew their roles: stand back and let the professional handle the cleanup. One almost wishes the chapel had been perched on a cliff. Tracy wouldn't have needed to push very hard, and not a soul would have objected. Meanwhile, Drew's newfound paranoia, accusing Michael of shooting him, was enough to make one wish Martin Gray had resigned on the spot. But Martin, ever the opportunistic snake, seems determined to nudge Drew further into his vendetta against Tracy. As if Drew's character weren't insufferable enough already. His shooting could have provided an opportunity for depth, maybe even change, but instead he's emerged more irritating than ever. In contrast, the true highlights of the episode were found elsewhere. Ned and Gio's touching conversation, Jason's tender farewell on the staircase, and the collective walk down memory lane with flashbacks honoring Monica's decades of legacy. It was moving, heartfelt, and beautifully executed. Even Gio's decision to attend underscored the depth of the Quartermain bond, though the absence of Monica's great-grandchildren remained a glaring omission. The performances deserve mention. Steve Burton and Jane Elliott carried the weight of grief and love with extraordinary subtlety, honoring not only their characters' relationship with Monica, but also their real-life closeness to Leslie Charleson. Emmy-worthy, without question. But let us not forget the moment that brought levity to the morning. Tracy briskly wheeling Drew out before he could sour the proceedings any further. The only thing missing was a standing ovation. They call Sonny and Jason the greatest duo in soap history. Wrong. The truth is, it was never loyalty. It was exploitation dressed up as friendship. Every so often, a character on General Hospital undergoes what can only be described as a midlife epiphany wrapped in soap opera melodrama. Jason, of all people, has stumbled into one. With his mother's death rattling his steel facade, Jason suddenly remembers he has blood relatives who aren't named Sonny or Carly. Imagine that. After decades of servitude to the mob's most dysfunctional duo, he's now contemplating life as an actual Quartermain. Of course, he hasn't abandoned old habits entirely. He's lying to Carly by omission, keeping Jocelyn's secret about her little spy games and WSB entanglements. He's avoiding Sonny altogether, as though proximity might drag him back into eternal hitman purgatory. For once, his first thought isn't, "What do Sonny and Carly need?" but "What does my family need?" The fact that this realization took the deaths of both Sam and Monica is both tragic and infuriating. Meanwhile, the writers are finally giving Jason other relationships beyond his mob shackles. His evolving dynamic with Tracy is a refreshing detour, proving he can interact with people without holding a gun or babysitting Carly's latest crisis. And the long-suffering Lisan contingent is salivating. Elizabeth appeared at Monica's funeral, and in classic soap fashion, that single gesture could be the spark for a full-blown reunion. After all, whenever Jason and Liz reconnect, it starts with shared grief and escalates into clandestine encounters. Fans are even speculating about Liz's hair length as an omen for romance, because apparently follicles are now storyboarding devices. And why not? Elizabeth, unlike Britt, wouldn't reduce Jason to a sidekick. She would give Danny the stability Sam wanted for him, reunite Jake with both parents, and blend the families in a way that even Alexis could stomach. Monica would have adored it, and Britt would finally be put in her place after years of sneering at Elizabeth. It ties two legacy families together and reclaims the Quartermaine name from years of mob overshadowing. For once, a logical, legacy-driven move actually exists. Which means, of course, the writers will probably avoid it. But back to the present circus. Jocelyn, playing Nancy Drew with a body count, drags Jason into yet another untenable situation. Instead of calling literally anyone, her mob boss ex-stepdad, her hitman uncle, her shady mother, even her rich absentee father, she chooses Brennan. Now Jason, professional vault of the family's dirty secrets, has to protect her recklessness. She put him in the worst possible position, and the fallout promises to be explosive. If Carly forgives Brennan the way Willow forgave Drew, expect collective eye rolls strong enough to shift the Earth's axis. The larger question is whether Jason can finally break free of the Sonny-Carly gravitational pull. Their relationship has long been romanticized as an epic bond, but stripped of nostalgia, it looks less like brotherhood and more like Stockholm Syndrome. Sonny plucked a brain-damaged young man out of confusion and molded him into his personal enforcer. The tragedy is that Jason believed this arrangement was loyalty rather than exploitation. Decades later, the lapdog routine is stale, the magic is gone, and Jason deserves better than to die as a mobster's shadow. Yes, the trio, Sonny, Carly, Jason, has anchored the show for years, but anchoring isn't always a compliment. Sometimes it just drags everything down. Their storylines cannibalized airtime from the Quartermaines, decimated legacy families, and sucked the oxygen from newer dynamics. Even die-hard fans admit the endless Sonny worship and Carly propping became unbearable. Yet, like bad furniture, the trio remains, because the network believes familiarity sells. And so the question lingers, will Jason finally claim the life that has been dangled in front of him for decades? Or will he once again shuffle back to Sonny's side, a nearly 60-year-old attack dog mistaking chains for devotion? The answer will determine whether this catharsis becomes the most interesting Jason story in years, or just another false start buried beneath Carly's tears and Sonny's gunsmoke. Here's what nobody wants to admit about daytime TV. Some soaps have started to look more like plastic surgery ads than dramas. Friday's trip down memory lane, complete with flashbacks, offered more than just nostalgia. It offered proof that the women of General Hospital have aged with a grace rarely seen on daytime television. Yes, they were dazzling in their youth, but the real triumph is how striking they remain today. Without the overinflated lips, suspiciously frozen brows, and surgical detours so common elsewhere, Tracy, Lucy, and Laura deserve full honors for standing as living reminders that aging doesn't require erasing oneself into a mannequin. The soap world, often dismissed as frivolous, quietly provides one of the few platforms where seasoned actresses continue to shine, long after Hollywood's leading men would have traded them in for ingenues half their age. The contrast becomes even starker when looking across the fence at the young and the restless, or the bold and the beautiful, where even women under 50 sometimes appear more constructed than cast. Meanwhile, General Hospital embraces authenticity, and the result is far more compelling. And speaking of compelling, Erica Slezak may have been on screen for only minutes, but what an entrance. Stunning doesn't even begin to cover it. Stella, resplendent in that blue dress, looked worlds away from the dowdy scrubs she once wore on Bob Hart's Abishola. Christina Melandra Wagner remains nothing short of a treasure, and Jane Elliott? Always beautiful, but now with her silvery gray hair and elegantly braided updos, she radiates a refined sophistication that younger Jane, gorgeous though she was, could never have matched. In short, General Hospital proves that beauty doesn't fade with time. It simply evolves. And in this case, it evolves into something even more powerful, elegance that cannot be manufactured in a surgeon's office. Jason and Lulu together? Absolutely not. Let's shut this down before it ever happens. Some ideas are so preposterous they deserve to be shot down with a childhood slingshot before they leave the writer's room. Pairing Jason and Lulu falls squarely into that category. The very suggestion reeks of desperation. a test balloon floated by producers who must assume viewers are blind, bored, or both. Jason and Lulu have always functioned in the realm of sibling-adjacent friendship. He's been more mentor than lover, more protective cousin than romantic lead. To suggest otherwise is not only implausible, but borderline creepy. It's Sonny and Emily level misguided. The audience doesn't want Julu, and the visceral disgust it provokes says everything. Of course, this isn't to say Jason is starved for romantic options. He has an entire carousel of partners, both past and potential. There's the constant will they won't they cycle with Elizabeth, though that particular well has been bone dry for years, reduced now to awkward gossiping and HIPAA violations rather than actual chemistry. Carly remains the one pairing that once burned hot, though fans of Jarly are a proud but dwindling minority. Britt, meanwhile, is the eternal wild card. Some call her insufferable, others swear she was Jason's best match because she actually challenged him. Naturally, the writers killed her off just as she became interesting. If not Jason, then surely Lulu herself deserves better. Saddled with grief and memory-sharing scenes, she risks being left to orbit endlessly in platonic limbo. Pair her with Gio, and suddenly the chemistry becomes so palpable even the actors are wary of leaning into it. Match her with Chase or Vaughn, and you've got sparks in angry exchanges. Throw her into a triangle with Maxie and Nathan, and you've got soap opera gold. Betrayal, best friends at war, and a dead husband replaced by his widow's BFF. Now that is drama. The broader problem isn't just Jason and Lulu, but the entire romantic landscape of General Hospital. It's a desert. Teen stories, non-existent. 20-somethings, either vanished or languishing in dull pseudo-romances. The older couples who should provide stability are practically invisible. Instead, the show is drowning in Sonny Carly-Nina merry-go-rounds and endless recycled pairings that make exciting feel like a foreign concept. Once upon a time, Port Charles teemed with romance and danger. Teens solving crimes, late-night parties in New York, tangled love triangles that made betrayal delicious to watch. Now, Emma and Gio offer the only flicker of potential, while everyone else cycles through uninspired couplings, or worse, resurrections of abusive exes. The show seems determined to convince us that boredom is the new passion. Which brings us back to Jason and Lulu. The very notion is not only creatively bankrupt, but it would send Carly into a meltdown the size of the Corinthos coffee empire. And while watching Carly implode is always entertaining, sacrificing Jason and Lulu for the sake of her tantrum would be a price too high. In short, no, absolutely not. The answer is still no. And if producers need further clarification, allow the audience chorus to echo it louder. Jason and Lulu is a storyline better left in the trash bin, alongside Sonny's endless romances and the ghost of Britt's wasted potential. They'll bring back Nathan, who nobody asked for, but they won't even mention Dylan Quartermain? Let's talk about that insult. General Hospital has never been shy about rewriting history, but the decision to stage Monica's funeral without so much as a whisper about Dylan Quartermain borders on the absurd. One would think that a son, brother, uncle, or, at bare minimum, Tracy's pride and joy might rate a throwaway line. Yet Dylan's absence wasn't explained, excused, or even acknowledged. Apparently, in Port Charles, beloved family members simply poof out of existence. This oversight doesn't exist in isolation. The list of missing mourners could fill an entire pew. Where was Sasha, who surely could have managed a day trip for Monica's farewell? Where were Scorpio and Jax, who couldn't be bothered to send flowers? Scotty Baldwin, too elusive to crawl out of hiding for a single day? The Wards, who vanish and reappear depending on the writer's collective memory? And Anna, supposedly tied into every plot in town, absent without explanation. Kevin Collins also remained conveniently invisible. For a woman of Monica's stature, this funeral should have been bursting with familiar faces. Instead, it felt like the producers rented half a church and prayed no one noticed. The most glaring omission, of course, is Dylan. Not only is his absence unaddressed, but the refusal to recast him for a day or two is baffling. Josh Kelly could have easily stepped into the role, yet instead of offering fans a satisfying nod, the show leaves Tracy standing alone, stripped of the son who would have given her something tangible to hold on to. Viewers don't expect miracles, just competence. A single line about Dylan being out of town and sending love would have cost nothing. But competence, it seems, is in shorter supply than Quartermain's. The irony is rich. The writers are quick to resurrect Nathan, a character no one was clamoring for, while ignoring fan favorites like Dylan, Spencer, or Johnny. Dylan's history with Georgie, his fraught romance with Lulu, his dynamic with BLQ, uncle and niece, almost peers in age, all provide fertile ground for story. Instead, the show pretends he never existed. Yes, casting presents challenges. Scott Clifton remains tethered to the Bell machine at Bold and the Beautiful, no matter how thankless the role. Robert Palmer Watkins, the last actor to play Dylan, is busy stacking credits elsewhere, though he's publicly teased his interest in returning. But if General Hospital truly wanted Dylan back, it could make it happen. A soap with this much legacy should not be undone by recast cowardice. Even if Dylan were to stay gone permanently, his absence should not be treated as an editorial error. A single mention would have sufficed. Without it, the entire tribute becomes lopsided, an otherwise heartfelt farewell undermined by a glaring, avoidable omission. The Quartermains are famous for their dysfunction, but this was negligence disguised as storytelling. Here's what no one wants to admit. Drew Kane isn't the hero of Port Charles. He's the problem. Martin Gray has once again aligned himself with the very man determined to scorch the earth beneath Port Charles. Yes, Drew Kane, the walking embodiment of self-righteous destruction, has reeled Martin back into his corner. The irony, of course, is that Drew wasn't above targeting Martin's own sister, Laura, in his political crusade. Family loyalty clearly isn't a factor when it comes to Drew's vendettas. Martin's return to Drew's payroll, however, isn't quite the shameless capitulation it appears to be. His hand was forced when Drew leveraged Stella's freedom, cornering Martin into cooperation. Yet, unlike Drew's usual army of sycophants, Martin is showing signs of resistance. He's warned Drew about the dangers of perjury, dropped stinging truths about why Drew won't be welcome at Monica's eventual funeral, and even dared to redirect Drew's fury toward Tracy. No small feat in itself. The more intriguing question is whether Martin's compliance is simply a facade. Is he biding his time, subtly undermining Drew until the opportunity for a clean break or a satisfying betrayal presents itself? A Martin-Laura-Tracy alliance has the potential to be deliciously effective, the perfect counterbalance to Drew's swaggering arrogance. Of course, Laura's role in this remains questionable. True to form, she is a perennial soft touch, reluctant to turn her back, even on family who repeatedly tests her patience. But imagine if Martin's cooperation with Drew is actually a cover for working with the FBI. The prospect of Martin helping orchestrate Drew's downfall from the inside isn't just poetic justice. It's the kind of twist this storyline is begging for. In the meantime, Martin's quiet defiance stands as one of the few glimmers of sanity in Drew's circus of chaos. He may have caved under pressure, but he hasn't completely surrendered his spine. And when the inevitable reckoning arrives, Martin might just be the one to tip the scales. This may be the most ridiculous Cassadine storyline General Hospital ever aired. And yes, that's saying something. General Hospital has never been shy about dabbling in the bizarre, but the Chloe Morgan Eyes of Helena saga deserves its own wing in the Museum of Soap Opera Absurdities. It's the kind of storyline that sounds like it was cooked up during a particularly reckless brainstorming session, and then, shockingly, actually aired. Chloe Morgan, conveniently introduced as Lila's cousin, was meant to be a charming addition. Instead, she became roadkill in Helena Cassadine's endless murder tour. Dressed in Alexis's coat, Chloe was run down when Helena mistook her for her actual target. The accident gifted Chloe a brain tumor, because in Port Charles, traumatic brain injuries double as mystical plot devices. This tumor naturally allowed Chloe to psychically see through Helena's eyes. Yes, visions of Helena. Because why not? What followed was an elaborate and almost comical dance of manipulation. Stefan Cassadine, having staged yet another of his deaths, kidnapped Chloe under the guise of rescuing her. He then kept her captive on a Cassadine island, convincing her that Helena was holding them both hostage. In reality, Stefan was exploiting Chloe's visions as his own personal surveillance camera on Helena. It was as ludicrous as it sounds, stretched out over months of melodrama. The storyline became even more baroque with the resurrection of Stavros Cassadine, masquerading under an alias until Chloe inconveniently had a vision that blew his cover. Ever the gentleman, Stavros responded by murdering her, but not without a touch of regret, because even sociopaths have standards. Her death marked the end of a character who, for all her potential, had been reduced to a mystical pawn in the Cassadine family chess match. The arc itself unfolded between 2000 and 2001, a stretch that paired Chloe with Jax and occasionally threw her into the Cassadine circus ring. It was long, convoluted, and ultimately unsatisfying, yet oddly memorable for those who stuck with it. For others, it has faded into the kind of soap opera haze where one is never entirely sure whether it really happened or was just a fever dream. In hindsight, Chloe Morgan's tenure is a reminder of General Hospital's worst storytelling impulses, a promising character buried beneath gothic gimmicks, psychic visions, and endless Cassadine plotting. She deserved more than to die because Helena needed a new set of eyes.